Hi everybody, I'm Elise from the blog LesPetitesSaintCrochet.com, and today we are talking all about how to knit cables. Olive Goober. So let's talk about what cable stitches actually are. It is just a textured stitch in which the order of the stitches has been changed. So you can see this on little Ferguson Bunny here. All of this, these little details are cables. What I love about knitting cables is that it looks so beautiful. There's so much detail there, and it really is not a difficult skill to learn. Now, there are some things that I'm going to tell you about and teach you that are good tricks to have, because let me tell you, you have to pay attention to details when you're knitting cables, because I had to restart this sweater because I was super distracted. I was trying to watch TV. I was trying to do a few other things, and I got messed up and I had to redo it because I wasn't paying attention. So that's probably my biggest tip, and we'll go into that a little bit more later, but is you have to pay attention when you're knitting cables. So I did a little research about where cable knitting came from in my Vogue Knitting Ultimate Knitting book. This is a fantastic resource. I will leave a link for it in the description box below in case you're interested. But I was really surprised to find out that cable knitting is not as old as I thought it was. So it's been around since around the 19th century, and it was up in the North Atlantic. Women were knitting sweaters for their husbands who were out at sea, and they were fishing, and they needed something really warm to wear. And the women were knitting wool sweaters, and then they started adding cables, and I thought that was such a cool thing because it really was an adornment. It was to make them look really pretty and to probably show off the skills that the women had, and they were at home for long stretches of time by themselves because the men were all out at sea. So I really thought that that was super interesting, and I think little Ferguson here looks a little bit like a fisherman. The great thing about knitting cables is that you need very few supplies. You're definitely going to need your own knitting needles. You will definitely need your own yarn, and if you can get a cable stitch holder, it's going to make life a whole lot easier. I have the hook kind right here, and there's a different kind that is a double pointed, sort of a bent shape cable knit holder that you can buy as well. These are very inexpensive. You can find them in the link below, or you can just go to your local craft store. Most of them will have cable knit holders, and I think these are literally like less than $1. The most important consideration when you are going to knit cables is to choose the correct yarn. So this is the Debbie Bliss Baby Cashmerino, and I really love this. I make all of the patterns for the little cotton rabbits with it, all of the clothing, and it is a smooth yarn, and it is very beautiful. There are a lot of colors. And if you choose yarns that are not too textured, it's okay if it has a halo, if it's a little bit fuzzy, that can be really beautiful. A smooth yarn is really good as well, but you don't want something like a faux fur or something that has fringe or like metallic flakes or something on it that might take away from your actual stitching. So that's a really important consideration. Also, you might want to think about that cable knits show up a little bit better with lighter colored yarn. Now, I did use the red, and I still think it looks really beautiful and it shows up really well. And lighter colored yarns are really gonna let those cables just pop right out, and you will really see that. So the thing to think about is I would not use something like a self-striping or some type of maybe a hand-dyed yarn that has a lot of variations, because you don't want something fighting against the beauty of your actual cables. All right, so I've got all my supplies ready to go here. I'm going to go ahead and create a back right cable swatch. So I'm going to demonstrate how to do it for you. If you would like to do it with me, go ahead and cast on 18 stitches. I'm using the cable cast on, and I use that just because I use that with almost all of my toy knitting. And let's meet right back here once you have that done. So we have our first row of purls, and now we are getting ready to start our second row, and this is where we are going to start cabling. So how this is divided, this is 18 stitches, so we are going to have 6 purl, 6 knit, and 6 purl. The 6 knit stitches in the center are actually going to be our cable stitches. So let's go ahead and purl 6. So I have 6 purl stitches right here, and I'm going to turn my yarn to the back because we are getting ready to knit the next 6 stitches. This is where we're going to work our cable. So what I find sometimes is the easiest is to flip our work over, and I've got my cable stitch holder here. And I'm going to take these first 3 stitches that are right here, and I'm going to slip them on to my cable needle and hold them in the back. Now this can sometimes be a little bit tricky getting it in there. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to turn my work over, and I'm going to pull these stitches right off. Now, one of the things is you don't want these to twist. You want these to just lay nicely in the back. So they're just being held in the back, and I'm going to now knit the next 3 stitches from my left hand needle. So 1, 2, 3, and then I am going to pick these stitches up again, holding them on the stitch holder. Get my working yarn here, and now we are going to pretend that this is just a regular knitting needle, and I am going to knit these 3 stitches just like normal. And there we had just created our very first cable here. So now we're going to bring our working yarn back around, and we will purl the rest of these stitches. So row 2 is in the front of our work, and what we're going to do is, now that we are starting row 3, this is the back side, we are going to knit 6, purl 6, and that's the middle 6 are our cable, and then we will knit the last 6. Then we will turn it over for row 4, and we will purl 6, knit 6, purl 6, and then we will go back to row 5, and we will knit 6, purl 6, knit 6, and this is the very front of the work. So why don't you go ahead and do that. I will leave the written instructions in the blog post and in the YouTube description box below in case you want to make this little swatch with me, and we will meet back here for row 6. We are on row 6, and we are getting ready to do another cable stitch. So we are going to go ahead and just purl the first 6 stitches. And you can already see that beautiful cable stitch already starting to form because you have changed the order in which you knit your stitches. All right, so we have 6 here. I'm going to get my cable needle, and I'm going to turn my work around, and I'm always going in this direction because if I go in this direction to put the needles on the cable stitch holder, I'm not going to be able to knit with them. So I'm coming this way in the same direction that my actual knitting needle is facing because I'm going to be using it to knit with. Okay, so I'm going to turn my work back around, and I'm going to take those 3 stitches off, and they're going to hang out right there, and that way they're flat and they are not going to get twisted up. So now we are going to go ahead and we're going to knit these 3 stitches right here. We're going to do exactly the same thing that we did. 1, and now we are going to pick up our stitch holder, and we are bringing it down and we are going to knit these 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. Yes, and this does feel awkward when you're doing this because you're literally changing the direction and you're pulling those stitches. So yeah, it does feel a little bit awkward. So now we're going to bring that yarn back around to the front because we are going to purl these last 6 stitches. So now you'll just do rows 7, 8, and 9, just like we did rows 3, 4, and 5. And this is just starting to look so pretty already. I love how that cable looks. It's so beautiful. So now you are a pro at this and you know exactly what we're going to do. We are going to purl these first 6 stitches. Now I'm going to take my cable needle and bring it here in the back. So I finished the little swatch all the way through row 13 and then I cast off in purl. So if you need more practice, continue to practice, continue working, continue getting comfortable with that cable stitch holder. But if you've got this, go ahead and rip it out and start on your project. I have 2 last pieces of advice when you are just beginning to learn how to knit cables. And number 1 is to eliminate distractions. And I personally know this quite well because I ended up having to restart this little sweater twice. Yeah, I had to do it twice, and that's because I really got distracted. I was doing it in front of the TV, I was chit-chatting, I was talking, and I really messed up, and I just could not figure out what I had done wrong, and so I ended up having to rip it out, and that was absolutely painful. The first time, the second time was even worse. I may have cried a little. And my second biggest piece of advice is to mark where you are in the pattern. I use little sticky notes that I like to just put right underneath the line, and that way I know exactly where I am. And I actually get a pencil, and if it's a really long row and I really need to focus and I need to see exactly where I am, and there's a lot of like knit 8, purl 2, then do another cable, because there are a lot of cables going on in this little sweater. There's not just one, there's 3 in the front and then 1 each on the little sleeves. So I would get my pencil and I would just check lightly exactly when I had done a part of the pattern, so that way I could keep up with where I was, and that makes a huge difference. I just want to thank you so much for stopping by the Les Petites Saintes Crochet YouTube channel today. It really means the world to me that you would take time out of your day to spend it with me. So if you would like this video and subscribe to my channel, that would be wonderful. It would really mean the world to me. And I hope to see you all back next week.